6 years ago, I fell from a second-story window onto the concrete below. The people who found me thought I was already dead. The doctors in intensive care suspected I was going to die, and when I realized what had happened, I wondered whether dying might have been a better outcome. I'd fractured my skull, I'd bleeds on my brain, massive internal injuries, and I couldn't feel or move anything from my stomach down. All of that added to the blindness that had happened 12 years earlier. I didn't choose any of it. I didn't choose the accident, the injuries, the consequences. None of it was my choice. But I've come to realize that sometimes we have the luxury of choosing our challenges, and sometimes challenges just choose us. It's part of being human. What we decide to do about it is what counts. And I want to share one decision that I think we all face regardless of what challenge we're dealing with. That is the choice to be an explorer or a conventionalist. Now, when it comes to exploration, I suppose I have two stories that I could tell you. Back in the good old days, whenever I was just blind, I did go to the South Pole, which has exploration written all over it, but in the 14 minutes I don't have time to give you that story. But as an expert in gathering disabilities, I have a second story of exploration, this time to do with paralysis. So we're going to go with the paralysis rather than the blindness today. I spent 16 months in hospital, and I discovered that spinal cord injury strikes at the very heart of what it means to be human. It turns us from our upright, walking, running, jumping forms into seated compromises of what we once were. We're not supposed to be sitting down. And it's not just the lack of feeling or movement, it also interferes with the internal systems which are designed to keep us alive. Nerve pain, spasms, medication, time in hospital, all of these things are common, and they exhaust even the most determined. In Western Europe, 7 out of 10 people never work again, and 4 out of 10 live below the poverty line in that developed part of the world. This is not a good story. But what I found even more challenging was that up to this point in history, it has proven to be impossible to find a cure for paralysis. Impossible to find a cure. Yet, history is filled with accounts of the impossible made possible through human endeavor, the type of human endeavor that took human beings to the South Pole 100 years ago, the type of human endeavor that took astronauts to the moon 50 years ago. And inspired by these stories of exploration, I set about traveling around the world to find a new wave of explorers. This time, people concentrating on finding a cure for paralysis. People working in exercise physiology, trying to reroute the nervous system through exercise. People working in robotics, trying to build exoskeletons to augment the human form. And people working in science, using electrical stimulation combined with drugs to supercharge the nervous system. But rather than tell you what that means, I figured it might be better to show you. So I've got a little video to show you what I've been up to in the last 6 years. Can we play that video, please? I don't want to be stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. The goal is to try and walk. No. If I lay in bed or just sat in my wheelchair, I'd be giving up completely. I know
that the fitter and stronger I can get, the more chance there is that I will be successful to trial a set of robotic legs.
It's good to be back.
Hey.
Whoa.
So what do you think?
Yeah.
How's walking?
Great, yeah. We need a bigger room. The mission now is to connect physical exercise guys, the knowledge and robotics people, and the scientists.
How are you doing? Good to see you. Go. Good.
Yeah. Go on, Mark. Go on. Go. Wow. Well done.
Good.
It's really exciting. It's ridiculous. It is it, really.
Throughout history, the explorers, thank you. Thank you. It's good, but it's not good enough because I'm still sitting down. But throughout history, explorers have always relied on collaboration to break boundaries, to make the impossible possible. And I just want to tell you two stories of the many stories over the last 5 years where collaboration has been key in our exploration to find a cure for paralysis. One to do with the research, and one to do with the commercialization of that research to get it to the human beings who need it. First and foremost, back in 2012, I traveled on our global tour to San Francisco to test the robotic legs that you saw in that video. A company called Exobionics were producing them. I became the first person in the world to own a set of those robotic legs, and I've done 1 million steps in them since I bought them. Now that is good, but it's not good enough. We need more. So we went to visit scientists in Cambridge, in Harvard, in Louisville, eventually in UCLA. And we met a professor called Reggie Edgerton and his collaborator, Yuri Gerasimenko from the Pavlov Institute in Russia. And they explained to us that they were using electrical stimulation combined with a drug to excite the nervous system, to excite the damaged nervous system so that people like me could voluntarily move. And you saw that in the video, my left leg moving voluntarily. In that meeting, we were there for maybe 3 days. They had the electrical stimulation, I had the paralyzed legs, and Exobionics had the robotic legs, and we proposed a study to combine all three. Reggie and Yuri were interested, I was interested. We had to discover whether Exobionics were interested, so we flew from LA to San Francisco to see if the founders were interested. We got in a conference call with Reggie. Within 6 months, I had moved from Dublin, Ireland to Los Angeles for 3 months. And at the end of that 3-month study, we had combined electrical stimulation of the spine with a drug, with robotic legs, and I was able to voluntarily move my legs while I was walking. That is, my paralyzed muscles contracted, and the robot did less. As I did more, the robot did less. And now we fund a scientist in Ireland to continue that work, to move on to clinical trials. Wild collaborations to produce interesting results. But research is only interesting if it moves from the lab to the clinic. And we found that so many of the researchers, so many of the scientists were struggling to commercialize their research, to access the deep industry expertise, the business know-how, and the capital required to cross what's known as the Valley of Death, to move from the lab to the clinic. And in particular, the UCLA group, who were trying to commercialize the electrical stimulation, were struggling to get finance. And with my mission, which is stated to be that we want to find and connect people around the world to fast-track a cure for paralysis, it made sense that I attempted to help them. And through the World Economic Forum, and particularly my colleagues in the Forum of Young Global Leaders, we started to explore networks to see if we could find capital and expertise to help that company. Those conversations led to a venture capital company. We brought in the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation from the States, and right now there is a $6 million special investment fund, which is $3 million, has $3 million, it's still looking for $3 million if anyone else has any $3 million handy. But it's getting there. And I suppose the point of me telling you these stories is, remember at the start I said that up to this point in history it has proven to be impossible to find a cure for paralysis. That's what we're dealing with. And we're trying to get scientists, technologists, financiers, foundations, governments, private sector excited and interested about something that is impossible to solve. Now, how do you do that? How do you get people excited about something that is proven to be impossible to solve? And I think back to a book that I read after I went blind called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, the story of a survivor of Second World War concentration camp. And he quotes a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how." And if we think back to why we're doing it, when we face difficult times, if you know why you're doing it, all of the difficulties fade away. The South Pole was easy. The explorers 100 years ago proved that was possible. Finding a cure for paralysis is the new expedition, beset with problems, but through collaboration, it is filled with possibilities. And I want you to close your eyes. If you close your eyes as I finish here, because that's my story. But the question is, what do you get out of my story? Because it's got to be about you. At the beginning, I said that sometimes we choose our challenges. Sometimes our challenges choose us. What we decide to do about it is what counts. And if you are in the business of writing an account of history where the impossible is made possible, then I suggest you start thinking like explorers and forget about thinking like conventionalists. Thank you. Gracias.